I know why this is so important to you. I know. But there is no evidence indicating an abduction.
That's why we're going to Lake Okoboji.
Welcome back, everyone, to Rock Hard Caucus. This is Iowa's most important, some would say only podcast worth listening to. That's certainly true, right? There's no reason to listen to any of this other stuff.
That's what I've heard.
We're here with our 234th episode. Yeah, that's right. It's currently February 1st of 2026. We have an important guest today. I think I'll do this before I introduce our guest. We have an important statement from one of our elected officials that I wanted to start the show with. This was on January 27th, just a few days ago. The journalist Igor Bobik, who I did zero research. I don't know who that is. Evan, do you know who Igor Bobik is?
I'm pretty sure we've said their name on the podcast before.
Oh, really?
I think so.
It is kind of a memorable name, but yeah, it didn't.
Didn't he play for the New York Rangers?
Oh, is that it?
New York Rangers hockey team. I think he was like 10th last year in assists, something like that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm not a sports watcher, so I'm very, very ignorant on some of that.
Yeah, I don't know hockey. I do know the hockey show, Heated Rivalry, that everyone is watching. That's
so is Igor Bobik in that?
Oh, wow. So he does have a hockey connection. Would have been better if he didn't.
But yeah, Igor Bobik tweeted the other day, tried asking Chuck Grassley, the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, whether it's appropriate for ICE to enter homes without a judicial warrant. And Chuck Grassley responded, ask a constitutional lawyer. I'm a farmer. So I thought that might be good sort of opening context for bringing our guest in. We have returning for his third appearance on Rock Hard Caucus. We have Dr. Chris Jones. Welcome back, Dr. Jones.
Yeah, great. And so I appreciate the opportunity to maintain my appearance frequency at greater than 1% of all caucus episodes, and so I can go another 66 episodes or something like that before drop below 1%, and
we'll check in another year and a half or so maybe.
Good.
So there is kind of bad news. Unfortunate news is that Chris Jones now has the stink of electoral politics on him. He is running for Secretary of Agriculture in Iowa. So you're no longer, I don't know, you've sort of entered into a new class of person because you have the arrogance of a politician now because you are seeking to hold some sort of authority over the rest of us.
Well, believe me, that's a point I've considered very strongly here in the past couple months, that once you agree to accept that stain upon your body, there's no going back. And unfortunately, they don't let you do it without putting that mark on the secret spot on your body. And so
you sold a part of yourself now forever. I was fortunate enough to attend an event that you held in Iowa City about a week ago, and I got a copy of this pamphlet called Vision for Iowa, Food, Agriculture, and Environment, which is kind of, it's like your platform for this campaign that you are now running. I know that you were touring quite a bit. How's the campaign going? I guess we'll start with something very general like that.
Well, the official announcement was January 15th, although I had known for some time that I was going to do this. I had formed an exploratory committee, which, sounds so mysterious, right? But basically, it's just helps you get an idea if you're going to have an opportunity to raise any money. And then also, it gives you an opportunity to change your mind if you want to. And so I formed the exploratory committee I think at the end of November and formally declared on January 15th. Then we did, I don't know, 10 or 12-day tour, and I beginning in Des Moines and ending up in Iowa City. We went up to northern Iowa, down the Mississippi River, back to Iowa City, and I think I did about 20 events in that a 12-day span, and I was tired. And
I bet.
About 12 hours after the last event, I had a knee replacement surgery. And so now I'm convalescing a little bit from that. And
do you think that I assume there was some damage to your knee that required this replacement? Was that sort of a judgment from God, maybe, for like as punishment for, seeking elected office?
Well, I'm trained as a scientist, and so I'm all trained to dwell upon the objective here. And although we can't rule out, God's role completely, we can't say for certain there was no role for God. I think it's more along the lines that I played high school and college basketball and then ran 8 marathons, and now I had to pay the piper.
Yeah. So for those of us who, maybe haven't done those things yet, maybe we should abstain from vigorous exercise like that.
Yeah, that running especially, it's quite a high doing it, but it would not be my advice to take that up.
So I read through this pamphlet, again, Vision for Iowa, Food, Agriculture, and Environment, and I took a lot of notes. I highlighted a lot of things. I thought we could maybe dig into certain parts of your platform here. But I do love the way that this opens. I imagine a day when a miracle has happened. On that day, our streams run clear, our air smells of nature, and not the moldered waste of a swine legion.
Yeah, those are, people ask me, well, how are you going to get anything done? And I say words. So
you have
a way with them.
Yeah, you've accomplished a lot with words alone so far. Maybe this is a bigger question. Maybe we shouldn't jump into this yet, but something that I took away from reading this whole pamphlet, you put forward a lot of ideas, a lot of proposals for changes in policy for our state. And, right now it's a bunch of words, right? Mm-hmm. So what I'm wondering is, if you were elected later this year as Secretary of Agriculture in Iowa, how much power does that role actually come with to enact an agenda?
So, good question. The office was created by the legislature in the 1920s, basically to establish mechanisms so farmers wouldn't get ripped off by grain traders. Mm-hmm. In the present day, there's 14 bureaus within IDOLS, and I don't want to rattle them off here because I probably won't remember all of them. But and so there's the Pesticide Bureau, the Commercial Feed and Fertilizer Bureau, the Laboratory, and so on. So there's 14 of them. And so those bureaus essentially enforce the laws that the legislature passes that are germane to agriculture. And so, for example, the Pesticide Bureau, well, IDOLS has responsibility for licensing pesticide applicators. It has responsibility for investigating things when things go south. And so when we kill stuff we're not supposed to kill, and basically regulates the application of pesticides and tracks the use of pesticides in Iowa. So that's an example. In the context of Iowa, what I think is foremost in most people's minds is water. And so in 2013, we gave the Secretary of Agriculture responsibility for water quality over the 84% of our land that is farmed. And so, in terms of Mike Nigg, that gives him wide latitude to spend money where he sees fit, how he wants to spend it, what sort of things to spend it on. where geographically to spend it. And so we see now that this function within the agency and within the office has become primary in Iowa, both with voters and with elected people. And so, I think if we're going to give the responsibility for clean water to the Secretary of Agriculture, maybe we ought to have a Secretary of Agriculture that knows something about it.
Sure. Mike Naig being the incumbent Republican current person holding that office, I guess maybe specific criticisms here, like, do you feel he is allocating that money appropriately in any way, the money that he has to accomplish these goals?
I think the state's strategy is dumb, and that is we go and we sprinkle $1 million here and $1 million there and $1 million over yonder, and then we spend it on things that can be used as a prop, and then politicians can go out and stand next to that prop and say, "Oh, look at me, I'm for clean water." And so I think that's our basic strategy here and how we spend money. And we don't spend money very thoughtfully. We clearly don't spend it very strategically. And the way we're spending it on these, a lot of these edge of field practices, we call them, and other things that are just Band-Aids and diapers for the corn soy system. We're just never, ever going to have enough money to affect water quality at what we call the landscape scale. And so any one of these things might work in a vacuum, but in terms of a capacity to affect things statewide, I mean, it's a joke. And so, and we need some different approaches here. We need to think about this in an entirely new context. And so, again, that isn't what Naig wants to do. That isn't what people in establishment agriculture want him to do. What they want him to do is to buttress the corn soy system and stave off regulation. And so, in that regard, he's been very successful, right? The nutrient strategy has been very successful, but in terms of our water quality getting any better, no, it's worse, right? The nitrates was worse as it's ever been. It's as bad as it's ever been.
Mm-hmm. Maybe this is a good time to bring this in, actually. We did get a clean water plan from the opposition party maybe a week or two ago. I forget how long ago this was, but I have a brief summary from Laura Bellin, a fellow Iowa journalist, who summarizes the clean water plan from the Iowa House Democrats with 3 points. One is $600,000 for statewide water monitoring. Second point is increase funding for the aforementioned nutrient reduction strategy from $10 million to $30 million. That one might be an important point for us to elaborate on. But the third one is new tax credits and loan program for farmers using best practices. Chris, you did just say that throwing more money at a strategy that isn't working might not actually bring us the results we want. So increasing the funding for the nutrient reduction strategy from $10 million to $30 million, do you foresee that paying off?
Well, what we're talking about here is the Water Quality Initiative projects. That's the implementation arm of the nutrient strategy. Yes, Naig has about $10 million right now to spend. Actually, I thought it was about $12 million, but it might be 10. And he's got wide discretion to spend that money however he sees fit on these projects around the state. And so if I'm Secretary of Agriculture, do I want 10 million or do I want 30 million? Well, obviously I'm going to want the 30 million. I'm not going to spend that on things that Naig is spending it on. I'm going to spend it on things that helps transition us to different types of agriculture that are going to help rural Iowa restore some of its lost prosperity and then also deliver better environmental outcomes, better water quality outcomes. So I think, I'm not against them putting money into the water quality initiative fund because, that will be money that IDOLs can spend if I'm elected. The $600,000 for the sensors, let's talk about that for a minute. So Sensor Network was the program that I managed when I was working at the University of Iowa.
Yep.
And so that was, these guys in the legislature didn't like how I was doing my job, which means I was probably doing it exceptionally well. And they wanted me out of there. And then, when I finally decided to retire, then they passed legislation that moved that money from the University of Iowa to IDOLs. And so I'm not sure that it's really clear on the part of Democrats in the legislature if they know this. It's not like that money has gone away. That money is still there. Okay, that money is still there. It's from the fertilizer tax. Some people call it the groundwater tax. And so it has not disappeared. The money is still there. Neg just has it. Neg has it, and he's spending it on whatever, right? Whatever he wants. And so we don't need a big effort here to get that sensor money back over to the University of Iowa to fund the sensor network. And so I would tell you, if I'm Secretary of Agriculture, IDOLS is going to fund the sensor network. Mm-hmm. We're just going to, send that money straight over to the University of Iowa. They can set it up as they see fit and conduct research important for water quality here in Iowa and our agricultural systems. And so that part of it, I'm not sure is really all that necessary. I might have something wrong here, but that's how I see it. Yeah. The tax credit thing, we've talked about tax credits and conservation forever in agriculture. And it's one of these things that almost everybody likes the idea in the beginning because it seems painless, right? And so you do this, that, or the other thing, and you pay less tax on your land. The problem we have with these things is it's hard to find examples of these strategies working, again, at scale. And the truth of the matter is we don't tax farmland in Iowa at a very high rate. And so, I owned a house here in Iowa City on Church Street, and it was a 460 square foot house. Picture that house was in a Grant Wood painting. And I'm not kidding you. And what I paid on tax for that house and that city lot was more than what 80 acres of some of the best farmland on earth generated in tax revenues in Iowa. And so, if people are paying a lot of tax, then tax credits and these sorts of things can work. But I'm not sure that we really have farmers paying enough tax to make this very inspiring.
Sure. They're already getting a pretty good deal. And that hasn't incentivized them. Yeah.
And so they have benefit from all sorts of favorable tax policy, inheritance tax, and other things. And so as far as the Democratic plan, the opposition parties, you say, it's a start, right? We can bare minimum, we can say they brought this out there. They brought it out at the beginning of the session. If the intention was to create some discussion and inspire people to talk about water, then I think that happened. But let's face it, this is a colossal problem here, problem. Talking about putting 20 extra million into the water quality initiative. Well, the entire budget for the Des Moines Water Works, which of course has the issue with nitrate in its drinking water, I think their entire budget for a year is about 50 million, or maybe a little bit more than that now. And so what we're talking about here in amounts of money is less than the entire budget for the Des Moines Water Works.
Yeah. And Evan knows very well. He's been drinking a lot of nitrates over the past year.
Yep. I got a glass of tap water right here, straight from Des Moines Water Works.
Good man, Evan.
I got some Coralville tap water next to me here. Not as many nitrates as you. So I'm
Yeah.
While we're on the subject of taxes, though, I do have a couple of points from your pamphlet here, your agenda. Point number 2 calls for taxpayer-funded off-ramps for farmers wanting to recapitalize to farm more sustainably. And then point 18 is on the subject of property tax. Exempt farmland with a corn suitability rating greater than 50 from local property taxes if corn and soy is not grown on the land. So you do have some of these sort of tax incentives as part of your wide-reaching agenda here. Why are your ideas maybe more effective in your mind than what's being proposed by others?
Well, firstly, they're creative. And I would say that our formula here for determining property tax on farmland in Iowa is antiquated. It's based on this CSR rating, as you mentioned there, the corn soil suitability rating. And so this is an oversimplification, but the corn suitability rating goes from 0 to 100. The closer to 100 you are, the higher the tax you're going to pay. Mm-hmm. And so land with a high CSR is good for growing everything. It's not just good for growing corn. It's, every darn thing you can think of is going to grow there. So if you own this land, if you own land and it has a CSR of 90, well, what are you going to do? You're going to grow corn there because that's what your property tax is based on. It's based on this corn suitability rating. Mm-hmm. So I think we should tax the land based on the activity that's actually being conducted there and not the potential activity that could happen there. And so the potential activity is the CSR. But let's say you have a very nice piece of ground, the CSR is high, and let's say you want to grow oats there. Well, you're not going to get punished by the tax system for doing that under my proposal there. And so that's the angle there. Again, we should tax it for what's actually happening there. And so if you have a low CSR ground and you still insist on planting corn there, that ground is going to pollute a lot, right? We know marginal land contributes a disproportionate amount of pollution to our streams. And so, you got low CSR land and you still want to go full blast with corn and soy. Well, okay, let's talk about tax there.
And why does that pollute more? Just so I'm following the logic here.
So good question. A lot of times organic matter in this marginal land is low, and so it doesn't retain nutrients very well. It doesn't retain water very well. Soil structure is bad, so erosion can be worse. And so there's a lot of reasons why this low CSR land pollutes more, but those are a few.
Sure. Yeah, it doesn't hold the nutrients, so they go into the water, which is the problem, right? What about these taxpayer-funded off-ramps? I may have a clip from your Simon Conway interview on this subject, if you don't mind me bringing another piece of media into the conversation.
I don't mind.
So you propose some taxpayer-funded off-ramps for farmers who want to get out of the corn, soy, CAFO system and grow something else, do something else with their land. So would that maybe raise my taxes? I think a lot of people will be afraid when you bring up taxpayer-funded off-ramps because they don't want to pay for it. People are afraid of taxes.
Well, when you make that statement, the presumption is your tax dollars aren't going to support the existing system. And they are to a very large degree, right? And so billions of dollars have come into the state of Iowa over the past, 30 years to support the various farm programs. And just now, in recent weeks, we see Trump proposing to give tariff relief of $12 billion. $900 million of that will come to Iowa. And so, the idea that any sort of new thing like these off-ramps is going to increase our tax burden, well, not necessarily. And maybe, in fact, it might reduce our overall tax burden. Mm-hmm. And so these off-ramps, farming is a business that requires a lot of capital investment. The main thing there is land, but we see this farm equipment, this machinery is obviously not cheap. It's not something that the average person can go purchase. You have the buildings and the inputs are expensive, buying seeds and fertilizer and insurance, all these things. And so there's all these high cost inputs that are required here. Well, my idea here would be to get farmers to a low input system. And so by that, I mean they would not have to buy as much stuff to grow a crop and make money.
Mm-hmm.
Corn and soy, corn and soy is a high input system. The seed's expensive, the fertilizer is expensive, chemical, grain drying, crop insurance, machinery, all of it, very expensive. We can go to other systems where we're growing alternative crops like oats and clovers, alfalfa. We mix that in with corn and soy, and all of a sudden we reduce the inputs. And so the farmers aren't spending as much money. But to transition to that system may cause or require recapitalization. And so let's say, for example, you want to grow oats. Well, you might need some new machinery to do that. You might need some indemnification of the risk. And so under this scheme, we transition them to a low input system and we make an investment. At the end of a few years, we are no longer making that investment. Well, they took the off ramp, they got off, they're doing something different, they're making money. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's fair to ask the taxpayer to participate in these sorts of things. And I think it's way, way better than what we have now in terms of our tax dollars being used for farming. Like I said, we're just writing a $12 billion check to farmers. I mean, how smart is that?
Yeah. That was exactly the answer I was looking for, is that we actually already are paying for this a great deal. So this is not necessarily an increased tax. It is maybe a wiser investment. But, while we're on this subject of taxpayers supporting the existing farming system and how we could potentially change the system with our monetary support, you did go on the Simon Conway show on WHO radio. I believe this is the first interview you did after announcing your campaign, which did make me jealous, but he obviously has a wider reach than we do, so I understand. But you did get into this subject of farmers are supported by the taxpayers. Let me just play a clip here on that subject.
My point here is not to argue. My point is not to argue the tariffs. Yeah. My point is that farmers in Iowa and other states have long needed support from the federal government. Mm-hmm. And so clearly they're not getting the economic outcomes that they want. Farmers don't want to be supported by taxpayer money.
No,
so
they definitely don't.
They're not getting the economic outcomes that they want.
Okay, so you, Chris, and the host, Simon Conway, agreed there that farmers don't want to be supported by the taxpayers. Are we sure about that?
Well, I think farmers want what they perceive to be a fair compensation for their work and the investment that they've made. And so is that all that different than people wanting a living wage? Well, I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. I think there's a lot of angst in agriculture right now. And I think that's because of the reliance on taxpayer dollars. I think the other thing, too, is we turn a blind eye to the pollution. And there's lots of things that if farmers had their druthers, they would pick something else. Now, that doesn't mean, you're going to turn down money. But I think we want farmers to get on compensation track here, if you will, that makes sense. And so what we have now, what farm programs used to be was what we called counter-cyclical, right? And so in the bad years, they got more money from the government. In the good years, they got less money from the government.
Sure.
Now we don't have counter-cyclical payments anymore. They just get money all the time. Mm-hmm. And I think they farmers are aware of this. I think they're aware that it has kind of dinged their stature a little bit.
I see.
In society. I think there's an awareness of that. I think there's a pride factor here. And so we need ways, mechanisms to figure out how to create a different scheme here where they're being compensated fairly. The history of these things in the United States goes back to the Dust Bowl. Henry Wallace, who was an Iowan, vice president, he figured out you can't have all your farmers in your country going bankrupt at the same time because, that's bad for a country.
There are some consequences. Yeah,
there are consequences. And so we, you can have continental-wide natural calamities that can cause that sort of thing. And so we created this system of payments, and it's evolved over the years. And so I think there's always going to be some public involvement in farming. You just can't hardly find an example around the world where the public's not participating in that country's farming system.
Yeah, and it makes sense. They're growing, a necessary commodity. Food is I think of it as food being the necessary part of this. There's a lot of your agenda is opposing all of this corn being grown for the purpose of fuel ethanol, and I think that maybe is adding to some of this what you referred to as angst and the sort of like deteriorating relationship between the 98% of us in Iowa who do not farm but do have to support the farms to continue the economy of the state. Where was I going with that? I really just wanted to bring up that 98% of us don't farm, which is an important point mentioned in your pamphlet.
In terms of their farm income, we can say, okay, we're gonna throw them to the wolves, right? It's gonna be sink or swim. You guys figure it out. You're gonna be treated like every other small businessman or small business person in the United States. We could do that, but what's going to happen? Well, quite a number of them are going to go out of business, and then what happens? We have these big investors swoop in, and they scoop up that land, and then the consolidation issue is even worse.
Right.
And so I think this idea of just saying, we're just going to throw them to the wolves and let them sink or swim. I mean, nobody wants that. We can't have that because it's going to be bad for farming in the long run. And so how do we create policy that, like I always say, gives us the environmental outcomes that we want, gives farmers the economic outcomes that they want? That's what we need to figure out.
Yeah, it would be nice. So this idea of, throwing them to the wolves and letting sink or swim, in a vacuum, that seems kind of like, it's not, I wouldn't say fair, but it's like kind of closer to a fair deal than what we're getting now, where we subsidize and we keep these businesses afloat no matter what. But unfortunately, we have, aggressive predatory capitalism. And so every business that fails is just going to get bought up by the conglomerate and increase the big agriculture industrial problem that's really driving all of the pollution and everything that's really the problem that you're trying to solve with your agenda. I do like how you've kind of differentiated between the farmer who we see in our mind as the guy out there in overalls versus the corporations that are really directing the entire system. The farmers are also in many ways victims of the system that has us all trapped. The corn, soy, CAFO system.
I mean, here's the thing. We don't even let farmers farm anymore. Farmers are what we might call the practitioners of agriculture, but we've taken farming out of their hands. And so for a lot of them, they're diesel mechanics and chemical applicators. And so the whole idea of managing a farm and managing the biology that's happening on that farm and managing the assemblage of species that are there and making it all work with the plants and animals. We've taken all those decisions away from farmers. We don't even let them make those decisions anymore under this present system. That's what I want. I want us to give, return that decision-making capacity to the farmers. And when you do that, you can't all of a sudden, maybe you can't farm 5,000 acres anymore. Maybe, 640 is a better number for you. And then we start to repopulate rural Iowa. We return people to the landscape. We try to restore some of these small towns. And, look, where it's headed, people say, well, you can't go backwards, right? I have people tell me that you can't go backwards. And I say, okay, what does going forward look like to you? Going forward from this, what does it look like to you? Because I'll tell you what I think it looks like to me. I think it looks like some guy sitting in India on a laptop and farming 50,000 acres of prime farm ground in northern Iowa. That's what going forward from this looks like. And so when you can only do two things, and really it's only one thing, which is corn and soy, when that's all you can do, and it's really easy to do, well, guess what? A machine maybe can come in and do that pretty easily, can take that away from you. Whereas if you have a diverse farm where you have multiple crop species, you have integrated crop and livestock systems, and you're managing forage crops and all these other things, all of a sudden, well, that doesn't look so good to a machine anymore, because you got to have decisions that are being made almost on an hourly basis on, the condition of the farm, the biology, the weather, the condition of the animals, all these things. And so I think these people that say, oh, we need to go forward. Well, okay, if you want one person per county farming, sure, go forward, because that's where it's headed. Yeah.
So keeping the human mind paramount in the operation of these businesses, as opposed to automation and remote work outsourcing. Yeah, I hadn't really thought about it the way you presented it, like somebody across the world running the farm on a laptop. It's decimating the population of the state as well. Are they trying to just push us all away? Is that what all this unregulated pollution is for? Maybe this no longer should be land habitated by humans. If we empty out the state, just let robots tend to the land, maybe that's a more economic, big picture, more economically beneficial to the existing power structure. I don't know.
That theory is out there. I'll tell you. that theory is out there to make it so unsuitable for human existence that, yes, we will depopulate the state and leave it to some robot or some other person in India or wherever.
Well, yeah, rather than push you to embrace conspiracy theories in this interview while you're running for office, maybe we should look at some smaller pieces of policy proposed here. For example, we need policies that inspire non-operator landowners to sell, which is part of what you were just saying about, one person operating thousands of acres. That's really consolidating all the land into one owner. So how to break that up? Policies that inspire non-operator landowners to sell. And I guess the idea you have here is require cover crops at landowner expense on all rented cropland. So this is a major issue. I imagine that there are a lot of absent owners of these big parcels of land that are just renting the space out to, I don't know who.
So over half our land in Iowa is rented. I think it might be as high as 60%. So who owns that land? Well, it's people sitting in offices in Minneapolis and Omaha and Des Moines and Chicago. And, they want a return on their investment, right? And so conservation is going to come second. And so the way it works is farmers oftentimes are farming, what they call the home place or, whatever it was that they inherited, might be, several hundred acres, It might be more than that. Maybe they don't have any of their own land, and then they're renting land as it becomes available, that if they can get their hands on it, they'll rent it. And so that's the way it works. Consequently, we have a lot of a lot of young farmers in Iowa that would like to farm, but they can't get in because land is so expensive. They can't break in. Well, the old saying, God isn't making any more of it. There's a finite amount of land. How do you get land into the hands of these young and aspiring farmers that maybe would look more favorably on doing something different, other than corn, soy, and CAFO? They might be inspired by other more extended cropping systems and these integrated crop and livestock systems. How do we get the land into their hands? Mm-hmm. Well, what I'm basically proposing there is that you disproportionately punish the pollution on the land from rented land. And so,
right.
So let's require cover crops on rented land, or, whatever it is. You can think of 100 different examples. But we need to make policy such that it disincentivizes the ownership of farmland if you're not the one farming it.
Mm-hmm. This is maybe a little aggressive, and I doubt that you would want to go along with a plan like this. But the proposal you're making here is still treating land as property, as a commodity. Let's say we're in like a future totally like emergency scenario. Not that, the quality of our water currently is not an emergency, but, things are just so bad that we can justify a total like totalitarian move from the government. Rather than incentivize these landowners to sell, what if we just take it from them?
Yeah, condemned it, and is what you're saying there. What if we just went in and condemned it? And so,
sure, yeah.
In the United States, private property rights are sacrosanct, right? And so the idea of us doing that is not very high.
Yeah, if they're mad about the carbon capture pipeline eminent domain, then I don't think they're going to be happy about that.
Yeah, it's maybe not viable currently, but I'm just trying to think big, no bad ideas.
Well, I'm not sure why this popped into my head right now, but people don't realize how little farmland we would actually need in this country if we just used it to feed ourselves. And so we use so much of our land to grow grain for ethanol, and then also to feed livestock and some other things. We would need a very small fraction of the current land in production if we just wanted to feed ourselves. And so we view our farmland as a way to create wealth, right? To create wealth for the entire country, to create wealth in rural areas, to create wealth in corporate boardrooms that are, selling commodity grains on the Chicago Board of Trade, all these things. And so we're using our farmland in ways that are sort of counter to the old agrarian model, right? The Jeffersonian model that everyone talks about. And, I think it's time for us to think about what we're using all this land for in the country, and is this the best idea for it? And so I would suggest that we're doing a lot of really stupid land use in the United States, especially corn for ethanol, but a lot of other stuff too. And so how can we create this system where our primary objectives are human nutrition and environmental outcomes, and then farmer prosperity? And, we're not getting that. We have, lifespans are decreasing in this country. We have obesity is a terrible problem. Our water is polluted, and then farmers aren't getting the economic outcomes that we want. And so why are we doing this? And I can tell you why we're doing it, because who is getting the outcomes that they want? Well, it's Cargill and it's Corteva and it's Syngenta and it's Koch Industries and it's Iowa Farm Bureau and all these corporations that are selling inputs for the current system. These ungovernable multinational agribusiness corporations, they are getting the outcomes that they want, right? And so they make money even when farmers don't make money. And they make a lot of money even when farmers don't make money. Well, that's who's getting the outcomes that they want. And guess who funds, the incumbent Secretary of Agriculture's political campaign? It's all those ungovernable multinational corporations that I just mentioned there. So we don't have a Secretary of Agriculture here. We have a Secretary of Agribusiness. And so let's return the agency and the office to the people. And let's have the agency and the office holder serve the people and not corporate agribusiness.
Yeah, when you mentioned the priority for this land being the creation of wealth rather than the nutrition of the population, what you have to keep in mind is creation of wealth, for the most part in this country, does not benefit almost any of us. That wealth does not end up being our wealth. It ends up being the wealth of those large corporations that you just named. So, yeah, if they benefit from the status quo, then they are incentivized to maintain that status quo at all costs. And we bear the costs for the most part. We don't get the wealth, but we do get cancer. That's our prize for participating in this against our will.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing, right? The externalization of the bad consequences. And so we ask the taxpayer to shoulder the burden for the externalities while the private entities scoop up all the goody, right? They suck the goody out of the system and we're left with the pollution. That's what we have. That's what we have now.
Yeah. Can I bring up one small thing from your platform here? This is point 26, which is on the creation of a fleet of food mobiles, which I think is a cool idea to bring food into small towns and into food deserts and stuff. But I wanted to zoom in on this. You wrote here, Chris, rural people should not have to eat Quick Star. Now, have you eaten at Quick Star, Chris?
The chicken's pretty good. It's all right for a gas station.
So, there's more than just taste. It's important in the food that goes into your mouth. And so I would say, well, how much salt is in that chicken, firstly. And, I'm not judging the taste of these foods. What I'm judging is the effect on human health that might result from eating all your meals from gas stations. And when I was, so let's talk about this. This is meat. We're talking about meat now. And we see now we eat, even with meat being expensive, we still eat a lot of meat and it's still going up. Consumption is still going up as far as I know. When I was a kid growing up, in the 60s and 70s, you did not go to a gas station and get a piece of sausage pizza, right? You did not go to a gas station and get a bratwurst or one of those tornado things or, whatever. You went to a gas station to get gas. And now, you're inundated with these convenient foods, right? Just at every turn. And a lot of that is meat, and it's because meat is very easy to convenience. So as a consequence, we eat all this meat all the time. And, I think that's had an effect. And so, that's not going to be the meat in those gas stations is not going to be the chickens on Portlandia, right? Where you go out to the farm and you see how they were raised, and one was named Kathy and one was named, Elroy or whatever. It's our worst possible meat. And so I think this idea that we should not be eating meat from these sorts of places, I think, would be strongly supported by most physicians that you know.
Yeah, well, that's what you get if you listen to the doctors. If you go to the doctor and they make you feel bad about all those gas station lunches you have. Let's talk about the pipeline a little bit, because that is an important subject. And again, I have something from the Iowa House Democrats recently on this subject. If you don't mind me sharing this with you real quick. Again, I sourced this from Laura Bellin, one of the hardest working people in the state of Iowa. This is Brian Meyer, who's the leader of the Iowa House Democrats right now, talking about the carbon capture pipeline that, Summit has wanted to build this for years. It hasn't worked out yet for various reasons, but this is what Brian Meyer thinks about that.
What we would like to see is a compromise where we can still build the pipeline but protect property rights, and that's where we're coming from. And so when you just pass something that's an outright ban, it doesn't make any sense to us, and we know that's not going to be the final bill, Aaron. And so, let's have a serious conversation and get this done, so that we can protect rural Iowa, increase economic development in rural Iowa, but also protect landowners.
So do you dismiss?
Okay, and then the video goes on to, Laura follows up with questions about the environmental impact of building this pipeline, and do the House Democrats care about that? Which his answer is mostly no. I guess we could hear a bit of that.
The House Democratic position is that you want the pipeline to be built.
Well, the position is that we think that there's a compromise here, right? And so the compromise is, how do we build the pipeline and create these jobs in rural Iowa, but at the same time protect property rights? So yes, we would like to see the pipeline built.
Okay, that's probably enough of him for now. Dr. Jones, what is the purpose of a carbon capture pipeline, if you could remind us quickly?
So firstly, I've watched that thing about 3 times myself.
Yeah. You're running as a Democrat, by the way, just so that's clear.
What's that?
You are running as a Democrat, just so everyone's clear on that.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying. And I have been completely honest about this ethanol thing in saying that this is a bipartisan. This has been a bipartisan thing, right? And so Democrats bear just as much responsibility for the current condition here as Republicans. So what does a pipeline do? Well, when you ferment corn, CO2 comes off, and CO2 is a greenhouse gas, and it goes up into the atmosphere, and it can cause warming. So their idea is to take that CO2 from the fermentation process, put it in a pipe, pump it up to North Dakota down into an oil well. And so where it could either be stored there or it could be used to scour out recalcitrant petroleum from these wells that have declining production. Mm-hmm. So that, in a nutshell, is the carbon pipeline. This would not be viable. So here, if you want to talk about your tax dollars and you're already subsidizing stuff, this would not be viable unless the federal government had not established an $85 per ton carbon credit for this. And so let's remember that carbon credit was established under a Democratic administration and with Tom Vilsack as USDA secretary. Mm-hmm. So these guys these third parties, essentially, like Summit Pipeline, are going to take the CO2, pump it up to North Dakota, and pocket $85 in carbon credits, and they'll trade them and whatever. But this is going to be very lucrative, extremely lucrative. And I'm against this. I'm against it for a lot of reasons. But let's just talk about ethanol to begin with. Has ethanol brought prosperity to rural Iowa? And I would suggest to you that it has not. And so when we look at rural Iowa, we have 70 counties that are losing population. We see job growth in the counties where the ethanol plants are. Job growth in those counties is less than in the counties that don't have an ethanol plant. We have this idea, what will happen if ethanol goes away? Well, this is how I see it. 40 years ago, we decided to give rural Iowa a drug, and It's just rural Iowa's just gotten sicker over the past 40 years since we gave them that drug. And now everybody says, oh, we can't stop giving them that drug. It might kill them.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm just not buying that. I think this has been terrible for rural Iowa. Ethanol has been terrible for rural Iowa. The pipeline is just this cockamamie scheme, to throw this life raft to ethanol and let some billionaires make bank in the process. And how do ordinary Iowans benefit from this? I just don't see it. You hear these numbers that ethanol creates, gazillion jobs. Well, Dave Swenson at Iowa State, retired economist, said it was about 7,000 jobs in Iowa. Well, we have 11,000 square miles of our land is used to grow corn to produce ethanol. And so 11,000 square miles of our land and 7,000 jobs, that's less than one job per square mile of the best ground on earth. We ought to be able to do better than one job per square mile. We ought to be able to do a lot better. We ought to be able to do 10 times that much. But we have all this infrastructure. They've created this firewall, this too big to fail firewall. And so we're stuck in this sort of, I don't know what you would call it. We're forced to do a pilgrimage every other year to somewhere and kneel down to ethanol. And I'd say enough is enough. We need to start planning a retreat from ethanol. This pipeline is just a distraction. Average people do not like it. The writing is on the wall. I mean, this is a classic example of this horseshoe politics, right? Where the extremes meet up at the top, and that's what's happening here. And people do not want this. So why do both parties insist on ramming this down our throats?
Yeah, like that clip that we watched of Brian Meyer, he mentioned revitalizing rural Iowa and creating a lot of jobs with the construction of this pipeline. And does he actually believe that? And two, does he expect the people hearing him say that to actually buy that? Like, who believes that?
So I think in that same clip, at some point, he says something to the effect, oh, this was all just performative. It wasn't real, right? He says that on the clip. Well, okay, Are you going to tell us? Is somebody going to tell us when this is performative and when it's not performative? Are we going to hold up a sign and say performative, right? Don't believe it because it's performative. And then, next week they're going to not hold the sign up. So
this time it's for real.
Yeah, exactly. I just think this is not a plan. If we want rural Iowa to be viable for the long term, if we want young people living in rural Iowa, if we want schools and hospitals and roads and these sorts of things in rural Iowa, ethanol is not the vehicle to deliver those things. I mean, we know it has not done it. It has not done it. So let's try something different. Well, what can we do? Well, you need diversity on the landscape. You need diverse crops. You need a diversity of crops, a diversity of economy, and a diversity of people. And when you do that, all of a sudden you create jobs and you get money cycling through at the local level, and you return economy and you return the quality of life to rural areas. And that's what I'm about.
I guess that's one of my questions is, do you see your message resonating in rural Iowa? I mean, you've talked about your creative solutions. I mean, Justin and I are city folk. We are, pleased to hear the stuff about the water quality, but, you've talked about, regulations that a lot of politicians don't want to talk about. You've talked about, phasing out ethanol, things that might, contribute to some of the angst that we've talked about with farmers. So do you see that, they can see your vision and see that maybe there is a better way to do things, or are they stuck in, the status quo and what it can do for them?
Yeah, a good question. You can't ever, of course we interact with people that will tell us one thing or another, but we can't ever assume that they're representative, right? And so what's representative is what goes into the voting booth in November. And even then, maybe that's not representative.
Right.
So, we have this issue with the pollution. And Des Moines has had to ration water last year for 2 months. We have a lot of cities around Iowa that have an issue with nitrate. And so Cedar Rapids, Iowa City, Cedar Falls, Boone, Manchester, Decorah. And so there's about 60 or 70 cities. We have about 6,000 private wells in Iowa that have been contaminated with nitrate. I mean, those wells are not in Polk County, right? They're in the hinterlands. And then what's happened here over the last 2 years is we've laid this story about cancer over the top of all of that. And so I think people are ready to listen to something. And if you live in Lyon County and you have to drive to Iowa City to get chemo, 5 or 6 hours, all of a sudden it gets real, right? Shit gets real, right? In a hurry. And so I think that's maybe some of that is happening right now. I think that people see that these decisions on the landscape have consequences for the quality of life here, right? Where they have consequences for the quality of life. We see this brain drain where young people are leaving Iowa, and I have 3 adult children. I mean, they're long gone. 2 of them live in Colorado and 1 lives in California. They're not coming back. Why would they come back here? I think other people my age have the same sorts of stories. And so I think my perception here is that people sense something is wrong. And then we need a big tariff relief here, $12 billion. It's just like, who thinks this is good?
Yeah.
Right. I don't know. Maybe the people do, and maybe I will lose, and people will dance on my grave. Right. That we think it's great. It's possible.
Yeah, I can't wait to see that future, where we just keep on barreling forward. As it is now, Evan and I will be lucky to make it to 50.
Well, we hope you win.
You got to stop eating that chicken at Quick Start.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's a good idea.
That's step 1.
Yeah, we got to watch that. Chris, what's the date of your primary? I know that you have at least one other Democrat in the
2nd.
primary. June 2nd. Okay. You need some signatures, right, to make sure you're on the ballots?
Yeah, I think we're going to be okay. I mean, I think it's looking pretty good right now for the signatures.
Great. So just if anybody listening to this lives in like one of those counties where nobody lives, maybe reach out to the campaign to make sure that he gets the signatures he needs from so many counties in the state.
So this is a real thing. We're running for statewide office.
Yep.
Getting these signatures is no joke.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And this is where this realignment that's happened in Iowa this is just one small thing, but again, it's very disadvantageous to Democrats. It's very hard to get these signatures when all the Democrats are concentrated in 5 counties.
Yeah, yeah.
And you just don't stand outside of the Hy-Vee at some far corner of Iowa and hope to get, the signatures that you need. It doesn't work that way. So some of this is it's stressful getting these signatures, no doubt.
I guess, silver lining is that it does force you to do some outreach to places and people that a lot of Democrats would normally not bother with.
That is a one way to look at it for sure.
There is one last thing in your platform I wanted to make sure we address. This is early on. You're talking kind of about the concept of property rights, right? And you refer to this as a concept foreign to the indigenous people that once populated our state. And of course, they populated our state in much greater numbers in the past. But I do want to, make sure we remember that, indigenous people are still around and do still care about the condition of the state. So I was just wondering, like, do you have any like advisors like from the indigenous community who maybe are interested in like, helping you craft this agenda?
Well, I'm sorry to say I don't, but I do know the people, the Meskwaki people are farmers, and I think they're quite sophisticated farmers, and they know quite a lot about animal agriculture. And so I am interested in seeing what they do there. And I'm sure it probably generates less pollution than what the rest of it is generating. And so I'm anxious to learn what they do.
Yeah, something to keep in mind, maybe empower some of those people to make decisions. They got, long traditions, long history there. Your website is chrisjonesforiowa.com, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Great. I would love for people to go there and check it out. Maybe you could send Chris $20 like I did last week. Before we let you go, is there anything else you'd like to make sure our people are aware of?
Well, I want Iowa to be better. I mean, this is my home, right? I spent most of my life here. I think it could be a lot better. And so, there's a lot of things I could be doing right now. But I felt like, I had an obligation to do this and to at least create some discussion around these topics. And I think if it's going to get better here, we've got to have honest conversations about the current condition. And so that's what I'm about.
Yeah. I mean, we're all very grateful to you for, sacrificing what what could be maybe a much
so
more
I'm not looking for that. I'm not looking for that, and I'm just like you're not looking for, the attaboy on the $20. You're not.
No, I actually was hoping to get a little bit of praise for that. I work hard for that money, Chris. All right. Well, thank you so much for giving us more of your time. Always very fruitful discussions.
Absolutely.
Getting to talk to you. So, yeah, thanks for coming back.
Very much appreciated.
You're welcome. All right.
See you next time.
Yep.
All right. Hey, Evan, before we stop recording, you want to plug some stuff with me?
Sure. I actually just accidentally stopped my recording because I thought you were going to do like a roundup on your own or something, but
we might as well do it while you're here.
Whatever. Yeah. Let's go.
Lets you weigh in. I just didn't want Chris to have to sit through it. So don't forget that there's a Starbucks strike ongoing, so you should not buy any Starbucks. If you listen to Rock Hard Caucus and you buy Starbucks, you should be ashamed of yourself. Here's something less shameful. I'm playing with the band Lou Sherry at Gabe's in Iowa City on February 21st. This is a free show. It's part of Free Week, organized by the downtown district. So come on out to Gabe's, see a good band. Lou Sherry, as well as Dead Level Set and Airspace, also playing at Gabe's February 21st. Do you have anything to say about anything we talked about on today's show? Well, you can call us and say it to us at 319-849-8733. You can even mail stuff to us at P.O. Box 5336 in Coralville, Iowa, 52241. Or you can use your computer or phone to email us at rockhardcaucus@gmail.com. And after you give Chris $20, why not give us $1? Are we worth
Seems like
$1
a good deal
to you? We do have a Patreon, patreon.com/rockhardcaucus. It's a means to, show your support and allow us to continue doing this podcast. There are, some costs involved aside from our time and our mental energy. But in return for your money, we do have some stuff behind a paywall up there on the Patreon, including a brand new series we just started called Talking Shat. First episode is available now, features guest Josiah Sutton. We're talking about Invasion, Iowa, a TV show that William Shatner made in the mid-2000s for Spike TV. I think it's very funny. A very funny first episode of our podcast. I had a lot of fun, so I'm
Absolutely
looking forward to more of that. Time to end the show with a little bit of local music. Gunk Lung, a band from around here, recently released an EP called what was it called again? It's called the Happy Camper EP. And closing track is called Car on Fire, and we're going to hear that now. If you go to gunkalongmusic.bandcamp.com, you can get a copy for yourself. And if you have any music you'd like us to play on the show, please send it to us right now. Let me do my William Shatner voice. Right now. That's how he says it in the Huppie and Abraham commercials. Right now. Right now. Right now. Yeah, that's all. That's all I had to plug. Anything else, or should we just stop?
I think we should just stop.
All right, we're done. Bye.
All right, bye.
But are you, if we elect you as our Secretary of Agriculture, are you going to show up at a farm one day and are you going to use the words, I'm from the government and I'm here to help?
So why does I'm not going to use that phrase, but I mean, we have government to help, right?
Really?
We have government.
No, government is get out of my way. That's what we want. That's what this state, I think, wants. Get out of my way, stop taxing me, do less things, and watch us prosper.
So I would ask you, has that given us the water quality that we want?
Well, no, maybe it hasn't yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and I would suggest that maybe we look at different approaches here. If we're going to look at this empirically and look at it, the science.
We put your headphones on real quick because we're going to take one quick phone call that's just come in, and then I got to go to break, and you won't hear him without those. So who is this? This is Rod. Oh, Rod just dropped off. I'm sorry, Rod. We don't have time, my friend. Sorry. I don't know. I just literally clicked the button to bring him on the air, and he went away. So anyway, he did have a question. We'll have you back.